now, people are starting to miss paychecks. If they had resolved it before, the paychecks were due, and most federal workers get paid twice a month, then it would have been a moot point, because under current law, if you are working or not working, either one, that you will be repaid. There was a bill that was passed in 2019 that makes that clear. It gives a priority for the people who are required to work, so-called essential employees, versus ones who were forbidden to work, called non-essential employees. But in the end, both of them get repaid. It's just a matter of how quickly they get repaid. There are three issues that the Democrats have raised. Some have merit, some don't. One of which is they want to extend the COVID era expansion of tax credits for healthcare under the Affordable Care Act. It's set to expire on December 31st, 2025. They want to extend that. It's important to note that the government declared that COVID was over in May of 2022. And so we've already extended it to this point. Now they want to extend it again. We're subsidizing people, frankly, that are making over 400% of the poverty level. Just another example of the federal government has promised too much, subsidized too many, and that our healthcare system is badly broken and is in need of comprehensive reform. It's clear that the Affordable Care Act is not affordable. It's also clear that the Affordable Care Act is not sustainable. And so my personal view is something ought to be able to be worked out to extend those tax credits past the midterm elections, but they should lower the cap. In other words, we're subsidizing too many people. That should be lowered. And then ultimately what we need to try to do is engage in much more comprehensive healthcare reform. Let's say if it was extended to July of 2027, that would give time to try to be able to engage in some meaty healthcare reforms before they would expire again. The second issue is the Democrats want to roll back a lot of the Medicaid and other cuts that were included in the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which was in effect established the final funding levels for fiscal 2025, which ended on September 30. They want to roll back a number of those. They're not likely to be successful with regard to that. I think the ACA tax credits are the thing they're most concerned about. And the third issue, which quite frankly I have sympathy for the Democrats on, is they're wanting to reverse the attempt by the Trump administration to engage in so-called pocket rescissions. My personal view is we need reform there as well, given the huge deficits that we're running. My personal view is the law ought to be changed, whereby if the president proposes a rescission, the Congress has 45 days for either house of the Congress by simple majority vote to say no. And if either house of the Congress by a simple majority vote says no, then the rescission is denied and the funding has to be spent. The way that it is right now is the president has to end up presenting something to Congress. And if Congress does nothing, which is very adept at doing, it's very good at doing nothing, then the answer is no. Given our current fiscal situation and, where we are and where we're headed, I think that needs to change, but it would require legislation. I mean, there's no question that. So let me stop here with regard to the shutdown. We can talk about the tariffs too. Markets took a big last week, but rebounded today, even though today is a federal holiday. Of course, it doesn't matter much if you're laid off. So.
Okay. All right. So let's bring in our panel. We have Mark Lee, who's joined us from the United States. We also have Dr. Sharif from Bangladesh and Jatovi from the United States. We're going to take a look at this issue. First of all, with the government shutdown. I don't think it affects people so much in Bangladesh as it does in the U.S. And so we'll go to Jatovi if he unmutes his mic. And so what is your thoughts about this government shutdown, Jatovi?
The government shutdown, it's horrible for everyone. But the reasons that the Democrat Party is fighting for politically is a winning thing. Yes, I'm not worried about politics, but also in practicality and reality, it's also a big thing. For example, when we talked about I think Dave, you started off with the subsidies, for example. We can all agree healthcare is way too expensive. Healthcare is high for everyone, but the ACA, as a matter of fact, has slowed the curve in the increase in actual healthcare costs. Based on the studies that were done before the ACA was taken off, and actually after the ACA took off. And currently we know that as a fact, because if you remove the ACA subsidies, that means insurance will go way high. So battling for those to take place and actually to sign those into law would be a good thing, because we can take care of we can actually keep healthcare costs low. The ACA within itself was just a starting point and not an ending point in terms of lowering healthcare costs. I've got the two dogs in the background. But that's one piece. So that is a good thing that they're shutting the government, that they're fighting for that during this government shutdown, because in November 1st is when healthcare costs will skyrocket based on what the healthcare setup is now. With the cuts to Medicare and Medicaid, that within itself, again, is something that the Republican Party put into, as you stated, the big, beautiful bill. And that within itself is another thing that rural hospitals use as reimbursement for their cost when they take care of people who are uninsured. And there are a lot of people in the rural areas that are uninsured. So taking care of those individuals and recouping those costs is one big thing, and cutting out, I think it was $40 or $50 billion that they cut from that fund is what's hurting a lot of these rural clinics and a lot of these rural hospitals. So I guess I say all of that because, another thing is going back to the subsidies, I always find it interesting that the tax cuts were made temporary until they were permanent. But we can find time to spend money on these tax cuts, which actually cost a lot more than the actual subsidies. But the subsidies we can't find money for, but we can find money for golden plated stuff in the White House. But saying all that, my question is, why will the Republican Party and Donald Trump not negotiate and get this done, knowing that November 1st is when the costs skyrocket?
They will negotiate, and they've already said they will negotiate, but they want the government open first before they do it. Okay.
No,
okay. I mean, you may not like that, but that's what they've said. Okay.
Well, let's hear from Steve Rao, because he goes up to Washington, D.C. all the time. What are your thoughts, Steve, about this government shutdown?
Well, first of all, it's always great to see David Walker, and sorry, my background, I must have had a reset on my computer, but great to see you, David. Got my county commissioner golf shirt on, which is nice. Real quickly, I think that I've been, I think what David Walker has said is correct. I mean, the reality is, I don't think any of us are happy at where we're at, but I think we've got to figure out a way to come together and just get the government open and then get back to negotiations. I think it's a stalemate if either side is unwilling to move. Now, I think the Democrats are, and I think we've got to get both parties moving to the center to get this thing done. And people are getting frustrated out there. And, I remind everybody that, you got furloughed employees out there. We're closing in on the holidays. People need their paychecks. Tuition checks are due. People are working for the government and they may lose their jobs. And I just think Trump is also being very unrealistic and selfish to just take it out on whether it's, the FAA administrators or things like that. I mean, I don't know. You just hear rumors back and forth, but we are where we are, and we've got to really figure out a way. I'm not going to DC for a while because I'm down here with my campaign, but I don't know if David has anything to add there. What is it going to take to do a deal? How do we heal as a country so we can get back to governing? Because I think there's a difference between campaigning and governing. And what I'm seeing at the national level is that the campaign has never stopped. And I'm seeing this at a local level, this legislative level, and federal level, U.S. Senate, U.S. Congress, and presidential. So when does the campaign stop? When do we come together as Americans and start solving problems and getting things done? David, do you have any answers to that?
Well, I think the bottom line is both sides are in campaign mode. Okay, there aren't any winners on a shutdown, but both sides are in campaign mode, focusing on the midterm elections. Chuck Schumer in particular criticized roundly when he agreed to the clean CR back in March. And by the way, this is the first time that anybody's objected to a clean CR, right? So the bottom line is that he's getting a lot of pressure from the base of the Democratic Party to take Trump on. And unfortunately, I think what's going on right now is the Republicans are blindly following Trump. The Democrats are blindly opposing Trump. It's gotten to be a personal issue rather than a party issue. And the margins are so close where any election can result in a change of control, then the stakes go even higher, if you will. So as I said, I told you what I thought a reasoned and reasonable way to resolve this would be. And I think it would involve compromise on both sides. Some people say, well, how can you trust the Republicans to, be able to, negotiate in good faith between now and the end of the month? If they make a public commitment, the people can be aware of it and can hold them accountable if they fail to do so. But that doesn't automatically mean that you're going to get temporary tax credits, indefinitely, or that you're going to get the same subsidies that you have right now. As I said, I think it ought to be extended for a year and a half, or a little bit more, and that we shouldn't be subsidizing as many people as we are. And that's one of the reasons that premiums haven't gone up as much, is because we're subsidizing a lot of people that, quite frankly, shouldn't be subsidized.
Yeah, we'll listen to Rick Rosner, Emmy Award winner and also a very smart guy. What are your thoughts about this?
No. I just know what the opinion polls say right now, which is that the Republicans are being blamed more than the Democrats, which gives the Democrats encouragement to hang tough. We discussed in the previous hour that people get their health insurance bills on November 1st. So Vegas odds are saying there's a 2/3 chance this shutdown ends before the end of the month.
Oh, very good. And we have Jacoby.
I'm going to leave in 2 minutes. I'm just curious for David Walker. What would be the first thing you'd like to see us come to an agreement to?
Well, I think the ACA subsidies are the things that, where there is an opportunity for somewhat of an extension and possibly a limitation of those subsidies. I think you can get an agreement on that. And I think, frankly, the issue with regard to the pocket rescissions is something that you ought to be able to get an agreement on. Where I think there's a wide gulf, which you're not likely to get an agreement on, one, is the Medicaid and other reductions that were in the Big Beautiful Bill Act. I mean, that's something that I think you're not going to get resolved before November 1.
Yeah, and Jacoby, you have comments.
I mean, I think if we can get agreement on the subsidies and we can get agreement on other things with what the Democrats are requesting, if you can get an agreement there, then why not negotiate? That's my issue, is because there has been no impetus on Trump or the Republican Party throughout this whole year to even negotiate at all with the Democrats or do anything with the Democrats. They voted party lines on basically everything, especially that big, beautiful bill, which brings me to calling this a clean CR. It's not. You even said that the funding levels for the end of the year are changed based on that bill. So because of that, it's not a clean CR. They're upset because of the money that's getting pulled out based on that bill. So if it were a clean CR and based on funding levels from way back when Schumer voted before, it's not the same.
I understand what you're saying, but understand this. You're correct that the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was a partisan bill. Okay, no question about that. One of the reasons that it was done through budget reconciliation, so you could avoid a filibuster. Okay, but in fairness, you know how many Republican votes there were for the Affordable Care Act in both the House and the Senate? 1. 0 in the Senate, 1 in the House. So the problem is that whichever.
So, wait. I got
on.
a question.
Whichever party's in control has been trying to get their way as much as they can, as long as they can, whereas the sensible center, which is about country, center right, center left, is largely abandoned by our current system.
Here's a question, though, then, Dave, to push back against the idea that, nobody or on the Republican Party wants the ACA or whatever. They tried to pull the ACA 17 times. How many times did it get pulled? None. So that means some of the Republicans did have to vote for the ACA and keep it intact. So the argument there becomes null and void when you do that. So getting back to the big beautiful bill, which actually cut this funding, which is what their constituents want, then you're not voting for your constituents. This is what the Democrat Party is fighting for, is those constituencies or those constituents' healthcare costs, which every American and everybody is talking about is too high. So why would we not negotiate that? Because if we know for a fact the reason that the shutdown is there is because the Democrat Party, if we want to blame it on the Democrats, is because they are fighting for these subsidies, but we can negotiate and reopen the government if we just handle this right now, knowing that in November 1, we're going to have a skyrocket in those costs. Why not go ahead and negotiate and reopen the government rather than...
There's another issue. There's another issue underlying the shutdown.
Well, I'll be back next week. David, great seeing you. Thank you.
Take care.
I'll be in touch.
All right. The House is currently shut down, and Johnson says he won't open it up until the shutdown ends. But once the House is reopened, they have to hold a vote on the Epstein files. So the Republicans are happy to keep the House shut down.
He also has to swear in the Democrat,
which triggers the vote. When he has to swear in the new Democrat, which gets him to half of the House voting to have a vote on the Epstein files, and they don't want to have that happen.
Yeah, well, I think they ought to have a vote on the Epstein files. What happened to your middle finger?
I got something called trigger finger, where my finger locks into position. Where if you do too much gripping, I guess I'm a gripper, it locks like this, and you have to go like this to pop it out. So I
thought when you were just showing me your hand, I thought you were going to say, I thought you were a Texas fan, hook 'em horn.
It looked like that. I thought it was that thing that they show on in ads on the where you did.
Oh yeah.
But this is the doctor said nope, it's a different thing. But
Hey Dave, I got a question. Where is the two questions actually. One is that Nick keeps talking about the Democrats dying on the Hill in terms of the ACA and all along those lines, in terms of the medical stuff and everything. I'm wondering, are the Republicans dying on the Hill with the big, beautiful bill and everything like that? Because every time I hear the Republicans talking, that seems to be their talking point, is that it's very much a success, or they think of it as a success, and they want to maintain the success. Whether it's a success or not, only time will tell. But I'm just wondering, is that something that they're...
my view is the one big beautiful bill is another example of false advertising. Okay. Just as the Affordable Care Act was an example of false advertising, just as the Inflation Reduction Act was an example of false advertising. And it's a good thing that politicians aren't subject to truth in advertising, because they'd be in real big trouble. All right. Look, I mean, the fact is there's pros and cons to that bill, but I will say this. A lot of members did not want to have town hall meetings during the August recess because of some of the pushback associated with the one big beautiful bill. And Jatovy, what I'll tell you is I think both sides have risk with regard to what's going on now. I think the Democrats have risk because of the shutdown, but I think the Republicans have risk because of the healthcare issues. And part of it's a timing difference, right? But both of them are focused on the midterm elections. And in the final analysis, that's the thing that counts the most. So I think something will get done. The question is what and when. I just know that public trust and confidence in government is so low, and that anytime you have these shutdowns, it just makes it worse, not better.
Hey, Dave, just really quickly, a follow-up question, because you talk about it all the time on this show and everything, and then I've got a non-political question. Where is the sensible center in terms of the politics and all along those lines? And are we seeing some people that we can gravitate toward that are actually part of what you consider the sensible center in Congress and everything? And then my non-political question is, we're down to the Final Four, one of them being my Milwaukee Brewers and everything. So who's going to win the World Series?
Well, first, I'm not a betting man, but you obviously told me who you're for. Okay.
I did.
The answer is I don't have a dog in the hunt. You know, my dogs are out. Okay. So may the best team win. As far as the sensible center, you know, in the House, you can look to the Problem Solvers Caucus, okay, is attempting to be a sensible center coalition. In the House and the Senate, No Labels, which, as you know, I'm one of the national co-founders of, is forming a new coalition that's called the Bicameral Group, which are Republican and Democrat senators and members of the House that are trying to work together on issues. The first issue they're working on is permitting reform. They're also interested in fiscal responsibility and immigration reform. But the permitting reform, they think, is the easiest of the three. And so they're trying to start with that and see if they can get a victory on that and get some momentum to do more. The truth is that the sensible center among the voting population is a majority of voters. Although with regard to our elected representatives, they are a significant minority of our representatives. We now have a republic that is not representative of nor responsive to the general public. We need political reforms as well in order to revitalize our democracy and restore a true republic, which I'm happy to get into. But at some point in time, we need to talk about tariffs too. Okay, so
I want to ask you about China specifically. We've had kind of chaotic government for the past, 8-9 years, depending, but we were helped in not being too wrecked because China also had crappy government. But now it looks, according to what I'm hearing, it looks like the Chinese government is getting its act together. So what's going on with that?
Well, first, as we've talked about many times on this show, China has something the United States does not have, okay? And that is called a long-term strategic plan that focuses on economic, diplomatic, military, and domestic dimensions, that is future-focused, that is outcome-oriented. And we don't have that. We've been in business since 1789. I know you don't want to rush into things, but I would argue we're long overdue. Okay. Secondly, China, we have a better form of government. Okay. Because it is, we do have a democracy. China has an autocracy. And so China can get things done a lot quicker. But then again, there are few checks and balances and little with regard to civil rights. One of the things that I've always been concerned about and it's manifested itself within the last week, is that China has a significant share of the world's rare earth minerals. And China has 80% plus of the production capacity of rare earth minerals. And I've always felt that the United States needed, and this would be part of a strategic plan, the United States needed to take whatever steps necessary, either with regard to domestic capabilities and or partnerships with our allies to be able to secure supply chain for rare earth materials and other materials that are critical for prescription drugs. In other words, national security, economic stability, and public health. We have not done that. And as a result of having not done that, then China can exert significant leverage on us because if they cut off those, it's not just with regard to military matters, it's with regard to telecommunications, it's with regard to electronic vehicles, it's with regard to a number of different things that would be felt throughout the entire economy. Now, the market took a big hit last week, at the end of last week. It's rebounding today, I think in large part because of some of the comments that the president made, saying that he is going to meet with the Chinese premier and not premier with Xi. He is going to meet with him, and they're going to try to work something out. But this is just another example of lack of planning and effective execution, and we need to change that.
And with that, we'd like to bring in Dr. Sharif, who actually lives in Dhaka and has his pulse on Asia, and see what his thoughts are regarding this.
I can't hear you.
You're muted.
Doctor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, this is very interesting discussions, and definitely I like the economical impact because I run this talent economy. According to my understanding, what Professor or Dr. David Walker always said that USA do not have long-term plan, but China has strategic and long-term plan. But in terms of my study and other things, what I understand in terms of Trump initiative, he do not like globalizations, and he tried to save USA with lot of strategy and other things. Sometimes it's work, sometimes it's not work. But if we do a study the globalizations and offshores of 1970 to 2000, I'm in Bangladesh. I have a strong engagement in Asia Pacific. I just try to do research and engage with these communities. And I find that trade liberalization, like the general agreement on tariff and trade, and later the WTO allow cheaper import when globalization comes. And then USA companies move for production overseas, especially in China, Mexico, even South Asia, even Bangladesh, to reduce the cost. And then in 1994, NAFTA made it easier to shift factories to Mexico. Result, lower consumer price, but massive factory job losses for USA. And secondly, right now we see this automation like robotics and replacing of many jobs, AI and all of the things. In terms of financial things, what I understand that Wall Street and service company become dominant and investor demand like short-term profit. What you are discussing about these short-term goals, when this Wall Street and all of the big investment companies, they want short-term profit, they do focus on, and they may negotiate with their government and they become lobby for the US government, and they do these financial things. And now USA suffering. Honorable David Walker, do you think that this is the biggest mistake of US history, go for the globalizations and lose their control, especially the manufacturing industries, to China?
All right. Well, first, let me comment on several things. One, President Trump is well known for saying he's for America first. But what's important, it cannot be America alone. There's no way in today's world that the United States or any other countries can or should go it alone. There's tremendous interconnectivity. There's tremendous interdependence. All right. President Trump also talks about let's make America great again. I reject that. Let's keep America great. America is great, but it is at risk. And we have to take a number of steps in order to make sure that we stay great. And that's a lot of what's in my book, America in 2040, which you can find America2040.com. Tariffs. I've long stated that I think free trade is where we ought to be, with a few exceptions. Those exceptions are, we need to make sure, as I said before, that either alone or in partnership with our allies, and it's more likely to be the latter rather than the former, we are self-sufficient with regard to supply lines and with regard to manufacturing capacity for items that are critical for national security and public health. We need to be self-sufficient, either alone or with our allies. Beyond that, I think we ought to have free and fair trade as much as possible. And the only time that you exert tariffs is where there are unfair trading practices. Okay. By the way, with regard to the tariff situation right now, our Supreme Court, which just came back in session early in October, has a number of constitutional cases that it's going to have to consider. Its docket is very full because the president has been pushing the envelope on executive powers in a number of different ways. And one of the ways that he's been pushing the envelope is with regard to tariffs. And I think one of the real key question is, when the president unilaterally imposed tariffs on many countries around the world without congressional approval, okay, or without engaging in a bilateral negotiation with the countries, those could be at risk. Those could be reversed. And by the way, guess who some of the countries are that we didn't achieve a bilateral negotiation settlement on? China, India, and I could go on. So
I want to talk to China about China first. I asked AI.
Yes.
Does China look like Blade Runner? And AI came back and said, yeah, there are some cities that look like the frickin' future over there. China has 145 cities with a population of more than 1 million, industrial cities. The U.S. has 11. China has 18 cities with a population of more than 10 million. The U.S. has 0.
Oh, so, New York Metro is not more than 10 million?
8 million.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, but understand this. As Ross Perot would say, Rick, you have to open the hood and look underneath, right? Yeah. So it's not just totals. It's also the issue of things like demographics, skills. And look, the fact that China is producing a lot of things that don't have national security or public health implications, I could care less, right? I mean, it's better for our consumers to be able to get lower prices, if you will. The problem is we haven't taken a strategic approach to this. We haven't separated the wheat from the chaff between what's critical and what's not critical. All right, and as I said, it can't be America alone. It's got to be it's got to be America in partnership with others.
Just really quickly, how do we teach people? Because I know part of the reason that Nick and Kim founded this network was around economic education and education in general and all along those lines. And I think a lot of people are confused about tariffs because a lot of people still to this day, if you talk to the common citizens, think that tariffs are impacting the countries that the tariffs are being imposed on, and they're not thinking about the consumer element of what's going on and everything like that. So I just wonder, how can we get people to understand that they might be directly impacted by some of these tariffs? Because I think a lot of people are under a misconception.
Well, the importers are the ones that end up having to pay the tariff. And the question is, how much of that do they absorb in their profit margin? How much of that do they pass along to the consumer in the form of higher prices? Okay. The government gets the revenue, but the question is, how much of it gets absorbed by the importer, and how much of it gets passed on in the form of higher prices. And a lot of that has to do with broader supply and demand considerations. I mean, if there are other sources you can obtain similar items for and avoid the tariffs or reduce the tariffs. This hasn't played out yet. Okay, we still don't know what the playing field is because the Supreme Court hasn't ruled yet. Oh, by the way, and we can also kind of link the tariff issue with the shutdown issue, because my understanding is the president has been using tariff revenue to be able to, continue payments in certain regards, WIC payments, women and children payments, and also now allegedly he's going to try to use them to pay the military. And we are generating a lot more, tariff revenue, but on the other hand, it's modest when you consider the size of our deficits.
And I know other people got other things to ask.
Let me ask a question here. So in Trump 1, his first administration, it seemed like there were some competent people in there, like Rex Tillerson, maybe not the nicest guy, but the CEO of Exxon. And this time around, it seems like there may be more loyalists and fewer competent people. What do you think?
Well, first, Rex Tillerson didn't last very long.
Like a year. Yeah.
But because he may be very competent as a CEO, but he obviously didn't have any experience with regard to international diplomacy. And that's what the Secretary of State position is. I would respectfully suggest that Marco Rubio has done a very good job as Secretary of State, and he's never been CEO of a company, if you will, although he has been a U.S. Senator, for a number of years and on the International Foreign Affairs Committee. What I will say is, without commenting on specific individuals, there's absolutely no question in my mind that during the 4 years that Trump was out of office, that he spent a lot of time figuring out what did he want to accomplish in his second term, and who did he believe were the best people to work with him to accomplish that. And loyalty was a big part of that. Okay, people who agreed with where he wanted to go and were loyal to him. So I definitely think that that's a much bigger issue in the second term. And he said himself that, that he had to rely upon others to a great extent for filling his cabinet in the first term. And in some cases, people gave good advice, and in other cases, they didn't.
About the money going from one place to the other, he has also fired 4,000 people and not furloughed them during the shutdown. So is he shifting money illegally? I mean, shifting money that was for these individuals to cover those individuals, which also might be an illegal movement of money. The president shouldn't have that ability to do.
He's learned a lesson from Doge. Okay, Doge didn't do the right thing, and they didn't do it the right way. Okay, we do need a comprehensive review and reassessment of what the government does, how it does it, who does it, how we measure success. Dramatic transformational change, similar to what I did at GAO, which is transferable and scalable to the rest of the federal government if you get the right kind of leadership and go about it the right way. But what Doge found out is only Congress can cut spending. You can cancel a contract, you can cancel a grant, but you still got to spend the money unless Congress rescinds the funding. And that's where there's a battle right now about rescissions and the administration's effort to engage in what's called pocket rescissions, which means they send up the request for the rescission at the very end of the fiscal year, with the idea that the money will expire at the end of the fiscal year if Congress, fails to act. But I think what Doge found out was the only way that they could save money for sure was hiring freezes or reductions in force. Because when the Congress, provides its annual authorization, it provides a ceiling on head count, but not a floor. Unlike other appropriations where it's both a ceiling and a floor.
Well,
Hold on. There's been some argument about whether the president has talked about he's going to fire a bunch of people during this period of time. My understanding is there's no law that prohibits him from firing people, but he can't do it because of the shutdown. He's got to do it for other reasons. In other words, the shutdown in and of itself does not provide an excuse to fire people, and he's got to do it in a non-discriminatory manner.
Well, he's done both. He's used the shutdown as an excuse to fire people, even though he was going to fire people in the first place. Right. And he's also said that he was doing it. It was politically motivated, that he was going to go after. So basically, he's doing the opposite of what you said was right to do. And then on top of that, one of the worst things that he just did, even yesterday, was removing a lot of people from the special needs departments in the Department of Education. So now those without, or those most vulnerable amongst us, are now going to be harmed based on his actions. And in terms of the lessons around DOGE, they fired a bunch of people and then rehired them later.
Yeah, that's
right. So Trump does a lot of illegal stuff every day. So does every U.S. president. So do all of us.
We can't say that, Rick.
No, hold on. Let me get to my point, which is I roll through stop signs occasionally. I'll come to a complete stop. Illegal. Is anybody going to stop me? No, we don't have enough cops in L.A. And one thing Trump has learned is just do everything he wants, and some of it will be enforced. Some of it will be stopped by the courts. Just do everything, and legal or not, he'll get away with some of it.
I think your analogy is poor by saying, "Hey, I roll stop signs." Is rolling stop signs and pepperballing priests the same thing?
Yeah,
but you need somebody to enforce the law. If nobody's going to enforce it, then good luck.
Let me try to provide some contextual sophistication here, okay?
All right.
Trump is trying to push the bounds of executive power, okay? Mm-hmm. I do not believe that Trump is intentionally doing something that he knows is illegal, okay? I do believe that he is trying to come up with what he would call creative interpretations of what he should be able to do as chief executive. And he's done that with regard to a variety of issues, some of which he will be struck down on and have been struck down on. Others of which, he might prevail on. But it comes back to something that was said a little bit earlier. He follows the premise, that it's better to do something and maybe get struck down later if he's wrong. What is the old saying? It's better to ask forgiveness rather than permission. Is that what it is?
Yeah, but I disagree with that, Dave, because I think he actually intentionally does things that he knows are illegal.
Well,
and then turns around and says that, hey, I'm going to find a justification to make this okay. He's done that numerous times. For example, when he got blocked by the courts and then turned around and did it again, knowing that he was already blocked by the courts. Take, for instance, what's going on with the immigration, with the sending different National Guard troops to different areas. He got blocked by the courts, but then, hey, I'm going to send it from another state.
Hold on. That has not been resolved by the Supreme Court, okay? And it will get resolved by the Supreme Court. So there's a difference between what a district court says and what a circuit court says and what the Supreme Court says. But let's just understand this. Nobody on this show, including me, knows what Donald Trump is thinking. So
Donald Trump does know what he's thinking. By the way, Rick brought up some very interesting points.
Yeah,
he doesn't know what he's thinking.
Yeah, he doesn't even know what he's thinking. But Rick brought some interesting points about The Best and the Brightest, which is a book by David Halberstam about the JF Kennedy administration. And I'm just going to pick on a couple industries I know a little bit about. Number one, the legal industry. Pam Bondi was selected to be the Attorney General of the United States. Now, one of my cousins, Bill Saxby, was the Attorney General under Nixon, and he went to Ohio State University Law School, which is an okay law school. Pam Bondi went to Stetson, which is right near where I grew up in Tampa. It is not even a top 100 law school. Even though one of my law partners went to Stetson, graduated number 2 in the class, his sister graduated number 1. Pam Bondi didn't. And not only that, Pam Bondi, I'm just picking on her, she would never even be interviewed for one of the top legal positions in the United States, wouldn't even go to an interview. Like Kravis, Swain Moore, Sullivan and Cromwell. There's a lot of good law schools, a lot of good attorneys who would take that position, I believe, but she isn't one of them. Now I'm going to pick on the other one, Linda McMahon. Granted, she married into a billionaire World Wrestling Federation, etc. But let's look at her education level. She has a bachelor's degree from East Carolina University. So she graduated from college. That's great. Should she be head of the Department of Education? No. Would some of the universities I've interviewed and teach at ever even interview her for a teaching position at a great university? The answer would be no, she's not qualified. Would there be somebody in the United States that actually has good educational credentials who would accept the position? That part we don't know. But what we do know in both these selections, a person that has any intelligence like Rick would say, I'm not even bothering to interview them. They don't even qualify to be head of Department of Education for the United States of America and head of the Attorney General in the United States of America. They wouldn't even make my top 30 list, let alone that. And this is the problem I'm seeing, Dave, with Washington, is they do not hire the best and the brightest today. They don't even hire the top 100. I'm not even sure if in the top 200, and certainly would not be my selection if I was putting together a team. So this is what I see that's very weak among politicians. They too tend to do like what you just said in your earlier commentary, look for who's a loyal, sycophant, obsequious individual and put them in that position, but definitely not the best and the brightest.
Well,
David, do we have really the best and the brightest leading the United States?
We don't have the best and the brightest in Congress either. Okay. I mean, think about it for a second. Okay. What are the requirements to be elected to the House or the Senate? A, you have to be a citizen. B, you have to be at least a certain age. And C, you have to live in a certain place. That's it. No wonder we get those are the only requirements. I will say this. Look, loyalty is arguably number one for this administration. Yeah. Arguably number one. Okay. But there are some good people. I would respectfully suggest I think Marco Rubio was a very good pick. I think the Treasury Secretary is a very good pick. So there are some good people that not only are competent, but are loyal. But you have to be loyal. Hopefully,
apparently that's the number one thing in Congress is you have number one thing in politics that you must be loyal, not competent.
Well, Linda McMahon was appointed.
Not competent, number one, loyalty, number two. It's the other way.
Linda McMahon was appointed to dismantle the Department of Education. Department of Education has only been around, I think, since Carter. It used to be part of health, education, and welfare.
Right.
And Republicans have been trying to. There's a saying from Grover Norquist. He wants to make government small enough you can drown it in the bathtub, and the Republicans want Department of Ed to go away entirely, and Linda McMahon is on board with that. And you don't need to be competent to scuttle your department.
Oh, well, that's true. But the thing is, again, is getting rid of the Department of Education the best thing in the United States, or making the Department of Education great again? I mean, we can have a very good educational system, and Dave and I have talked about it, by introducing things like financial literacy into our educational curriculum and getting people on board on the industries of the future. So it could actually have a meaningful purpose.
That's right.
But what we have right now is we have somebody who heads the World Wrestling Federation, which by the way, I love watching that stuff.
Yeah, the China
That
is
would not be my
China
ahead
is
of-
Blade Runner. China is the future. If we
China
want
is the
the future, we need an educated population.
Absolutely.
Look,
Absolutely.
our
Yeah.
most valuable assets are human capital, is our people. Okay, and let me provide a little contextual sophistication here. Our education system is failing us. It is our K through 12 education system is failing us. We don't even rank top 30 among major nations with regard to math, literacy results. We're teaching some things we should not be teaching. We're not teaching other things that we should be teaching, such as financial literacy, civic responsibility. But the real question is, if you look at it from a strategic standpoint, we need to have an overall strategic plan, and we had to have subcomponents. One subcomponent would be human capital. That is our comparative advantage. That includes education. That includes training and retraining. That includes immigration. That includes a number of different elements. All right. So what we ought to be saying is, what are we trying to accomplish? How do we measure success? And then how best to accomplish that? How much of it ought to be done at the federal level? How much of it ought to be done at the state level? How much of it ought to be done at the local level? You know, what's the proper role for the federal government? Do you need an entire department focused on that? Or should it be put within a key initiative within an existing department? Because my personal view is we got way too many departments and agencies. I can tell you firsthand, the more organizations, the more layers, the more players, the more hardened silos, the more inefficient and ineffective any organization is, especially government. I can tell you that firsthand. So look, we're not doing well on education. There are certain things that we need to do at the federal level, okay, with regard to education. And reasonable people can and will differ as to whether or not that requires a separate standalone department.
Yeah, right.
Recommendation with regard to education.
Yes, sir.
If you want to laugh and maybe be a little disturbed, there's a show called English Teacher. It's freaking hilarious. It's set in a Texas high school and really has the vibe of what it's like right now.
Okay. Well, teacher, but in the meantime, we're going to have to go. But we want to thank the Honorable David M. Walker, our guest, and of course, our commentators like Jitovi and Dr. Sharif. And we'll see you next time on Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker, only on the Pod TV.
Take care, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.